Hello and thanks for dropping in. Give me a sec. I just need to grab something from the freezer. Okay, today I'm making a soup out of these. Ready-made dumplings. These little guys are real lifesavers when you have to whip up a quick lunch or even a dinner and you don't have the time or energy to run to the store. All you need is a couple of pantry staples, a bit of veg, and about 30 minutes. Let's get going. I'll start with the pantry staples. What you see there is a shallot, a bit of ginger, and 2 tablespoons of white miso paste. Okay, you might be thinking, hold on, Robert, since when is white miso paste a pantry staple? My answer to that is, since always. White miso is a delicious and versatile ingredient. It can be used a dozen different ways, and it lasts 6 months up to a year in your fridge. If it's not one of your pantry staples, it definitely should be. Okay? Now that that's settled, I just need to prep these. There. These are being used exclusively to make the broth, so I only had to split the shallot and cut a few thin strips of ginger. Oh, I almost forgot. The recipe's not complete without a little bit of soy sauce. A couple of tablespoons will do to start. Next up is veg. I had a big carrot and half a package of baby bok choy sitting in the fridge, so I'll be using those. Because I'm adding carrot pretty much at the last minute, I sliced them pretty thin, only a couple of millimeters thick. That way, they can soften up a little bit in the soup, but still retain some snap. And as for the bok choy, I just pulled off the leaves. Next up is garnish, and I'm going outside the box a little bit and using Chinese sausage. Yeah, I know, I've got a little confusion going on between the Japanese miso and the Chinese sausage, but honestly, I don't really care. These guys are a little bit sweet, a little bit salty, they're kind of dense, a little chewy, but most importantly, my daughter loves them. I normally save them for fried rice, but today they're going to end up in my soup. I'm going to cut them into tiny little discs, fry them up, and throw them on top. The cooking actually begins with the sausage. I cut them on a diagonal, about a half, maybe a third of a centimeter thick, and they go into a cold pan on medium heat. No oil needed. You can see how much fat's inside those sausages. That'll render out as it cooks. As you can see here, this after about 5 or 6 minutes of frying. I actually took them a little bit further than I wanted, but that's okay. They'll still be delicious. I can now set these aside and move on to the broth. That starts with 6 cups of chicken stock, to which I'll add my ginger, shallot, and soy sauce. I'll bring that up to a simmer and let it go for about 10 to 15 minutes. That'll be more than enough time for the aromatics to infuse into the broth. This is a really simple way to take ordinary chicken stock, even if it comes out of a carton, and give it some personality. Just be careful and don't do what I did. One of the first times I made this broth, I went way overboard on the aromatics, namely the ginger. I used way too much and foolishly boiled the heck out of it, trying to get maximum flavor. What I got instead was maximum gingery bitterness, and a soup that wasn't really edible, so don't do that. Alright, it's been about 15 minutes, and I can already smell how good and deep this broth has gotten. It's time to pull out the ginger and the shallot because they've done their job. And it's also time to bump this soup up a notch. First thing to do is to pull out a little broth. And yes, I see that I somehow missed removing an entire half of a shallot from the pot. I'll get back to that guy in a bit. I'll pour the ladle of broth onto my miso paste. What I want is for the miso to melt, which will make transferring it to the pot a lot easier. It'll also help avoid clumps. This is a little trick I picked up when I watched Marion Grasby make her version of dumpling soup, which you should totally check out. Once the miso's melted, I pour it back into the pot. Dropping it in from a height, like what I'm doing, is not recommended, unless you like being splashed by simmering chicken broth. Anyways, once all the miso's in, I can bring this back up to a boil for the last couple of steps. The first step is to add dumplings. These are going in straight out of the freezer, so they're going to be like little ice cubes and stop the boiling in its tracks. I need to get the broth going again and then cook it an extra 6 to 8 minutes just to make sure the dumplings are done. See how the dumplings are all floating? That's a great sign. And the broth's thickened a bit from the starch released by the dumpling wrappers, which is also nice. I can now add the carrots, and these only need a couple of minutes because they're cut so thin. The bok choy are last into the dumpling hot tub. I'll just push them down to make sure that they're really in the broth. I just have to be careful doing this because I don't want to damage the dumplings. Once the bok choy is wilted, which will only take another minute, the soup is ready. And here it is, my super easy, weeknight ready, pantry staple dumpling soup with Chinese sausage garnish. It's light enough to eat for lunch or load it up with extra dumplings and veg and maybe some rice noodles and eat it for dinner. It's a complete meal with meat, starch, and veg all in one tasty bowl. And it's super customizable. You don't have to add carrots and bok choy and sausage like I did. Put in what you want or whatever you might already have. Odds are great, you're going to end up with a delicious bowl of soup. Thanks for watching. Before I go, I just want to send a big shout out to everyone who watched or commented on my bistec video from last week. Going from a couple hundred views to a couple of thousand was a hugely pleasant surprise, and I'm grateful for the support. I hope you like this recipe enough to give it a thumbs up as well, and if you really enjoy it, please click that subscribe button. I'll see you next week.